Reports are starting to surface about what the Raiders might do with their general manager and head coach positions. And honestly, this could shape the entire direction of the franchise moving forward. Plus, some weird news is coming out about Geno Smith. Guys, something serious is cooking. Stay tuned. What's up, Raider Nation? Welcome to the NFL Playbook Raiders. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This channel is all about breaking down everything you need to know about the Raiders. Look, let's be real about where the Raiders are right now. They've had an absolutely terrible season. I don't think anybody expected them to be this bad when the regular season kicked off, but here we are. They're sitting at 2-11, currently locked at a second pick in draft 2026. And the big question is, what happens next? The thing is, depending on who they decide to move on from, is going to completely determine how they build this team in the offseason and what direction this franchise takes. Now, I don't think one bad year in Las Vegas is going to kill the fire that Pete Carroll has inside him. The guy's a competitor, always has been. But here's the thing. It's not going to be up to Pete Carroll whether he stays or goes. That decision effectively falls on Mark Davis, the owner, and obviously Tom Brady, who's essentially running football operations for this group now. And from what I've been hearing, you don't need to worry about the general manager situation. John Spytek is in his first year as GM, and he's been considered safe and will continue to be considered safe going into his second year. But the real question is whether the Pete Carroll project is actually working out. Think about it. He's already fired 2 coordinators this season. He didn't get the quarterback situation right as head coach. All of these things can cascade and pile up on Pete Carroll, and honestly, a lot of folks within the NFL wouldn't be surprised at all if the Las Vegas Raiders head coaching job winds up becoming open at the end of the season. So based on what's being said in league circles, it really seems like the Raiders are leaning toward keeping John Spytek as general manager for another season, while there's a legitimate chance that Pete Carroll won't be continuing as head coach of this football team. And look, this is huge because I genuinely think John Spytek deserves a bit more time as the Raiders general manager. Generally speaking, the GM position is more of a long-term role. It's really hard for me to grade a general manager based on just one offseason in one season. That position has everything to do with the long-term success of a team. A GM is responsible for building the team for the future, hitting on NFL draft picks, things like that. Meanwhile, the head coach is more responsible for the current state of the team when it comes to wins and losses. So it's going to be interesting to see what they decide, but I really hope they keep John Spytek around. I feel like he needs more time before I can fully grade him or call for his job at this point. I definitely want to see what these players can do. They need more time. And honestly, Pete Carroll hasn't given a lot of these rookies many opportunities to get out on the football field. Sure, some of them probably aren't ready yet, but as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, right guard Caleb Rogers has been looking really solid out there. Last week, he had almost 40 pass protection snaps and gave up 0 pressures against the Broncos. Overall, he had a 75.7 PFF grade, which is pretty solid. Also, backup quarterback Kenny Pickett had what I thought was his best performance so far last week against the Broncos. Typically, I'm not a fan of firing a head coach after only one season. I think they should be given more time in most situations, but there are certain circumstances where if the job has really been done that poorly, you can definitely justify firing a head coach after just one season. Unfortunately, I think this season is one of those exceptions. One of the biggest selling points they gave us about Pete Carroll is that he's an experienced head coach with a great resume and that his floor was going to be really high for the Raiders. That's why most people expected the Raiders to be at least a 6 or 7 win football team. On top of that, he seems pretty stubborn. There have been a lot of issues in the locker room as well. We saw it earlier this season with linebacker Jermaine Pratt. It seemed like there was something going on between the coaching staff and him. They definitely didn't see eye to eye on certain things. Then there's the whole Jackson Powers-Johnson situation and how they've handled that. I didn't like that either. There are reports that Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll didn't see eye to eye and that Chip Kelly was essentially running a Pete Carroll-style offense. Just a lot of things that haven't been going well from a coaching perspective.
When you look at this football team, it doesn't seem like the effort is always there. It really felt like the team had more fight and more grit under Antonio Pierce than they've had with Pete Carroll. From a coaching perspective, we've seen so many different times on tape where the Raiders just look like a badly coached football team all the way around, especially at the offensive line position. And ultimately, Pete Carroll was the one responsible for assembling this coaching staff. One of his biggest mistakes was hiring offensive line coach Brennan Carroll. He definitely looks like he's not prepared for that role and doesn't have the experience. You can just see all the mistakes that the Raiders' offensive line has been making from a coaching perspective. Week in and week out, this team looks terrible from a coaching standpoint, looks unprepared, and when you combine all these factors, there's a decent chance that Pete Carroll has already lost the locker room. Then there's been a lot of smoke lately around Geno Smith not wanting to be part of this organization, And where there's smoke, there's fire. The final reason that really seals the deal here is money-related. And we all know in the NFL, you've got to follow the money, especially when your quarterback says things like, "That's why they pay me the big bucks." Let me start with the first reason why Geno Smith wants out of Las Vegas at the end of the season. Does anybody remember the whole Blame Geno press conference? Reportedly, Renz from Raiders Report by Chat Sports claimed that he had members of the Geno Smith family reach out to him on social media, and they told him that Geno wants no part of this organization. He's done with the Raiders, and he's sick and tired of Raider Nation. So, primarily, it is Geno himself that wants out of the Raiders. Now, if you have watched the last game against the Broncos, you are witness of Geno Smith injury, right? Now, here's an interesting part. There is another rumor in the market that Geno is potentially faking an injury. Now, I said multiple times before the Denver Broncos game that I heard Geno Smith could fake an injury. If you didn't see the game against the Denver Broncos, he had his hand stepped on, left the game, did end up returning, and then he was rolling out to the right, got hit, fell, and he landed on his shoulder. I'm not saying that Geno faked that injury. All I'm saying is this. When I hear something like, there's rumblings right now and certain players were talking about Geno apparently making jokes that he could fake an injury because he doesn't want to have to deal with some of the other things that are going on inside of that stadium, to me, again, where there's smoke, there's fire. If I hear an agent telling me that Geno could fake an injury, and then I see Geno Smith leave the field 2 times in different situations for that injury, and then Pete Carroll, when he talks to the media the following day, has absolutely no update on Geno Smith, I just think it's a little bit fishy. The Pete Carroll comments are another big piece of this. Here's what he had to say. "We're going to need the fans to support us." I believe Pete Carroll saying that to Raider Nation is proof that Geno Smith and several other players don't like playing at home because it's hostile. I've been told by agents and players that they don't like playing at Allegiant Stadium because of the hostility. If you looked at that game, Raiders-Broncos, it was all orange. And the Raiders fans that were there in attendance were rooting for the Raiders to lose. Geno Smith, when he ended up leaving the game, was getting booed. And the fans, the loudest the Raiders fans cheered in that game, outside of the touchdown to Jackson from Kenny Pickett, which was an electric moment, the only other time that the fan base really truly stood up on their feet and cheered was when Geno Smith left the field. I've seen Pete Carroll do and say things that don't make any sense this year. I've seen Pete Carroll defend certain players way more than he's defended by everybody else. And I'll sit up here and I'll say it. I believe Pete Carroll cares more about Geno Smith than he does the Las Vegas Raiders. So when I see the Pete Carroll comments about we need Raider Nation to support us, I think the us in that equation, he knows it's Geno Smith, and he knows Geno right now is frustrated with fans. He knows that Geno is frustrated playing at home. He knows how frustrated his quarterback is. And I think that Pete knows deep down that Geno doesn't want to play in front of his own fans, that Geno wants no more part of Raider Nation. And I really believe if Geno Smith finds a way to just drive himself out of Las Vegas, he's going to be gone. So Geno doesn't like us. We don't like Geno. He doesn't want to be here. And we desperately want Geno out. I guess performance is not an issue to decide this, but the money is. Yes, the Geno contract situation is a little bit more complicated and needs to be discussed in detail. Geno wants more money, and that's why he wants Raiders to cut him so he can get his guaranteed money. I will make another video on this. Stay tuned.